A dangerous day. There is an opposition between the Sun and Pluto, and historically a couple of really awful events have taken place while the Sun was opposition Pluto. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Monday, July the 27th, 2026. I will start this video by looking at the overall astrological picture, and I will certainly be considering the opposition between the Sun and Pluto, which is exact today. And having done that, I'll be looking at all of the 12 signs, and then I will finish this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start off by looking at the astrology for today. So here is a chart set for noon New York time on Monday, July the 27th, 2026. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So the moon is in Capricorn. Moon is in Capricorn all day long. And so you can see moon at 13 degrees Capricorn. And the moon in Capricorn makes a single aspect. It makes a square to Saturn. So, moon square Saturn, moon in Capricorn square Saturn in Aries. It's not exactly the most fun aspect in the world. It can be a bit sort of restrictive, and moon in Capricorn as well. Moon in Capricorn in an earth sign, it's quite sensible. It's focused on its own interests, and so that may say something about how we're feeling about the material world, about our money, about our own interests, and it will encourage people perhaps to be, ever so slightly selfish. But, there's nothing wrong with being selfish. Unfortunately, we all have to be selfish. We do have to make sure that we're not taken advantage of. And, we live in a difficult world. And with the moon square Saturn, it just might mean that sometimes we feel that we really have to look after ourselves. And it might occur to us that there are things going on which just might be quite limiting. Yeah, we might have all these things we would love to do, but with square Saturn, don't forget Saturn is stationary direct, and so that could be a little bit of an issue. So perhaps we should be sort of pairing our expectations and not trying to sort of take on too much. And this square between the moon and Saturn is tied up with Mercury. So as the day progresses, the moon moves towards an opposition of Mercury. So there is the T square, and so moon opposition Mercury. It can be about the way we are thinking. Both the moon and Mercury can be about thinking and about communicating and feeling as well. And there could be just things that we're worrying about. Moon opposition Mercury, once it gets going, starts thinking all these sort of thoughts about what could go wrong. Mercury in Cancer. Cancer is a sign that is very imaginative. And sometimes our imagination can go into overdrive, and we can think about, maybe all the things that could go wrong. And so moon opposition Mercury, then you throw in Saturn as well. So you've got Saturn on the T. So that might mean that some of us are afraid. We're afraid of how it's all going to unfold. But there is another way of looking at Saturn. Saturn is about discipline. And so moon opposition Mercury might be just a conversation or a chain of thought which is just going on and on and on, is going round and round in circles. It's not helpful, it's exaggerated, and Saturn comes along and says, get yourself together, just stop, there's no point of worrying about things. What are you going to actually do? Saturn is in Aries, and Aries is an action-orientated sign, but it's not action in an impulsive way. It's very considered action. This is the situation. This is what we've got to do. So I think there is potentially a constructive side to this T-square. But the main action is, of course, taking place in terms of the outer planets and how the Sun hits the outer planets. And of course, we've got the Sun opposition Pluto. Before I talk about that, I just wanted to just quickly look at the chart set for Sydney, Australia, because I know some people watching this video are in Australia or New Zealand, and the positions of the planets can, or particularly the moon, can be very different in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia compared to, say, California. So if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is still in Capricorn. The moon is going to be in Capricorn all day. Okay, maybe the moon right at the beginning of the day, first hours of Monday, maybe the moon is in late Sagittarius, but the moon is... There's the moon at 6 degrees Capricorn at noon in Sydney. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it maybe that moon square Saturn that I was talking about isn't really going to manifest until later in the day, and perhaps what's of more relevance is the fact that the moon is square Neptune, and so moon square Neptune, that's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. Moon in Capricorn, trying to be sensible, trying to get things together, trying to be organized. But square Neptune, in spite of your better efforts, something might confuse you, and you've got to understand what it is. You can't just ignore the confusion, but you can't be overwhelmed by it at the same time. So you've got to be realistic with that moon square Neptune, but don't be too inflexible. And then there is the heliocentric picture. So this is the position of the planets if we put the Sun at the center of the solar system, and straight away we see that the Earth is conjunct Pluto. So when geocentrically, when you've got Sun opposition Pluto, heliocentrically you see Earth conjunct Pluto, and this Earth conjunct Pluto is opposition Jupiter. And I like the way it looks like that. What I'm trying to say is it's kind of more descriptive. Earth conjunct Pluto. Here is the Earth. Here is the planet we're on, and it is conjunct Pluto from the Sun's perspective. So the Pluto influence really is really with us, and it is linked with Jupiter as well. So I know that Jupiter's a fortunate planet, but with the Earth moving from a conjunction to Pluto to an opposition to Jupiter, Earth moving towards the square of the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. That is quite intense. That is quite powerful, and it might just feel that something has to give, something has to change. And really, though, this Earth conjunct Pluto, it's kind of reflected in the geocentric chart. So let's look at the Sun opposition Pluto and everything else going on today. So when I talked about last week, I mentioned that a lot of astrologers are getting excited, or were getting excited last week, about this thing called what's called Barbeau's basket. So André Barbeau was this French astrologer who died recently. He was quite famous for, I think he predicted the pandemic, and he was really into outer planets and outer planet cycles. And he mentioned, for example, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which we're still very much in the Saturn-Neptune conjunction period, even though the Saturn-Neptune right now is, they are separate from each other. But Saturn will go retrograde, so Saturn will get moved back towards Neptune. I don't think it's not going to make the exact conjunction again. So he was excited about it. I believe that he was, quite positive about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Sorry about the dog, but she has to do what she has to do, and so this this Saturn Neptune conjunction was what Barbo was looking at, and now astrologers are just obsessed with the idea that you've got all of these planets at 4 degrees, like we had last week. So we had Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, Neptune at 4 degrees Aries, Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini. We did have Jupiter last week at 4 degrees Leo, but now Jupiter has moved off. So you could say that Barbo's basket, you see the basket, Jupiter opposition Pluto, then you've got the sextile Pluto, Neptune sextile Pluto, Neptune sextile Uranus. Uranus is still sextile Jupiter. But okay, Jupiter might have moved off, but the Sun is now at 4 degrees Leo. And so you could say that the Sun is really activating this all over again. So you could then might say that, well, the Barbo's basket, this is the day. This is, all of those outer planets are coming together. And you think about the aspects the Sun is making, Sun opposition Pluto, Sun trine Neptune, Sun sextile Uranus. So Uranus, Neptune, Pluto today, Monday, their power is, I think, very strong, and the Sun is bringing them, all sort of down to earth. And over the next couple of days, the Sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter, so it's kind of, all happening. So if you have been excited about Barbo's basket, and there is an idea that Barbo's basket is positive, that you can link it with some kind of golden age. It was last week that great? I mean, I know that we had sort of issues in the Gulf, oil price going up. That's perhaps connected with Neptune. The Sun is planets hitting Neptune, and the Sun is trine Neptune. But it seemed to be quite a difficult week. I wouldn't have said this was necessarily the beginning of a golden age. Well, of course, that's an exaggeration. But as far as, what it might mean, Sun opposition Pluto as an aspect does happen quite regularly. I mean, it happens once a year. And, the thing about the Sun opposition Pluto, I just looked at the heliocentric chart. It is also Earth conjunct Pluto as well. So maybe that opposition, if you're into heliocentric astrology, is more important than the conjunction or the square. So maybe we could say that, every 3 months we have a hard aspect, or at least a square conjunction or an opposition between the Sun and Pluto. But maybe, this is perhaps more important. But anyway, even if it's just once a year, Sun opposition Pluto, it's not that dramatic. It's not that unusual. So what makes this Sun opposition Pluto dramatic? Well, I think what makes it dramatic is the fact that you also have Neptune and Pluto involved. And, you might say, oh, well, Neptune and Pluto are, making trines. But a trine, sextile, they're just other aspects. There's nothing necessarily good about a trine or a sextile. It's just an aspect. It's just a connection. And so if you've got Uranus and Neptune and Pluto connected with the Sun, maybe you can indeed see something dramatic happening, which represents the broader power of the collective. And Venus is also involved. That doesn't seem sort of entirely obvious, but Venus is making a 45-degree aspect of the Sun. So Venus is today Venus makes a sesquiquadrate to Pluto, and it makes a semi-square to the Sun. Plus, Venus is making aspects to Uranus and Neptune, but micro aspects, the 15-degree series aspects, which would be kind of like semi sextiles and sort of multiples of those semi sextiles. 15 degrees. You've got a 15-degree aspect, or a what else would there be? You might have a 75-degree aspect, or a 105-degree aspect. These are all in that sort of semi sextile 15-degree series. And you can see that more clearly when we set up a 12th harmonic. So when you've got a 12th harmonic chart, you are, of course, you're taking all the positions of the planets and you're multiplying by 12. And so you reduce all the planets to absolute longitude, multiply by 12. Then you keep subtracting 360 until you're under 360, and convert back to degrees and signs. So if we look at the 12th harmonic of today, I'll show you what I mean. One of the reasons why I think it could be quite a powerful day. So from a 12th harmonic perspective, there is Uranus, Neptune, Sun, and Pluto, Neptune, Sun, Uranus. You see, they're all together in a conjunction. And so that might seem quite a long way between Pluto and Uranus, like 7 degrees. But you have to understand that when you use a 12th harmonic, you multiply differences by 12. So Neptune and Pluto, Uranus and Neptune are pretty close to the sextile. But when you use a 12th harmonic, it just means that the orbs get multiplied by 12. So there is this conjunction between those four. And then you've got Neptune making those micro aspects at 15 degree series. Venus making the 15 degree series. So from a 12th harmonic perspective, it's a very powerful day. And so this might be a time where something gives. And I'm not telling you where it's going to give. I'm not necessarily saying that there's going to be a specific event, but I do think that today could be pretty tense. I think there could be things happening which, in their own way, are pretty dramatic, and we need to be aware of that. We also need to be aware that astrologers kind of like to exaggerate. We can't help exaggerating, and astrology is a theoretical system. So theoretically, I see a load of stuff going on, and so I kind of look at things in a dramatic way. This is what astrologers do. And maybe in my introduction, I was a little bit over dramatic. Yeah, there were some events which I'm about to discover, which I'm about to tell you about, which did have Sun opposition Pluto, and I'm not saying these kind of events are going to occur today, but we just have to be aware, perhaps, of what could happen. And so I just want to finish by looking at 3 events. One event was an order, not an event itself, and that was Nixon's order to bomb Cambodia. So this took place March the 16th in 1969, and the Sun was at 25 Pisces and Pluto was in 24 Virgo. So this was considered to be a very big deal. It was during the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon had just moved into the White House because he won the 1968 election. And how does he deal with Cambodia? Because I think what was happening is the Viet Cong were active across the border in Cambodia, and he made the decision to bomb them, and it was considered to be a dramatic escalation of the war. I mean, I think the story goes that when he gave the order, he was drunk, and he sort of expressed the order in quite a crude way. But there is Sun opposition Pluto. Enough is enough. This is what we've got to do. We have to be aware of that, given that Trump is making all sorts of threats about Iran. I'm just kind of overwhelmed by Iran and how it's got out of hand, and a lot of people are making links between what's going on in Iran and and the Vietnam War. But it's a much worse situation from Vietnam. The Vietnam War, from the American perspective, you could argue was theoretically winnable. I mean, Iran, Trump is saying, well, I might launch a huge strike against Iran. I might not. I might have already decided. I might not have decided. But given the precedent of the bombing of Cambodia, which took place on Sun opposition Pluto. Well, maybe someone's going to make a decision to bomb. May not be Trump, maybe somewhere else, maybe something to do with the war in Ukraine, Russia making a decision, Ukraine doing something over the top. So that's a way in which Sun-Pluto opposition could work. Another event which took place when the Sun was opposition Pluto was the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff. So the Wilhelm Gustloff was a German troop ship. This was right at the end of the Second World War, January the 30th, 1945, which was incidentally the 12th anniversary of the German dictator coming to power, and so it was, there may have been up to 10,000 people on board the Wilhelm Gustloff, and it was moving from East Prussia to main Germany and across the Baltic. And so it was packed with people, and it was a hospital ship, but there were troops on board as well, and it was being shadowed by a Soviet submarine, and it was sunk, and up to 10,000 people were killed on the Wilhelm Gustloff. So, the Titanic, how many people were killed on the Titanic? Many, many more people were killed on the Gustloff than the Titanic. So it was the worst maritime disaster ever, I believe. And at the time of the sinking, the Sun was at 10 degrees 26, was that 10 degrees 36, Aquarius and opposition Pluto. These two events, you can look at it heliocentrically from a heliocentric perspective. If you look at the sinking of the Gustloff heliocentrically, we can change the coordinates. We can look at this heliocentrically. So if we look at it heliocentrically, there is the Earth conjunct Pluto at the time of the sinking of the Gustloff. Again, Sun opposition Pluto. Geocentric is Earth conjunct Pluto heliocentrically. So that is another way of looking at it. So that's an example of the Sun opposition Pluto representing a huge disaster. Now, in a conflict like the Second World War, you're going to have disasters every day. But this disaster, even by the standards of the Second World War, was pretty extreme. And a final event to look at, which is in some of our living memory, certainly in my living memory, is the Chernobyl explosion. So this is the chart of the Chernobyl disaster, with Uranus rising, and there is Sun opposition Pluto. The Sun was at 522 Taurus, and Pluto was at 559 Scorpio. And so in this case, you associate Pluto with radioactivity. Okay, I don't think this disaster didn't actually involve plutonium. It involved other radioactive materials, but still, I don't think it involved plutonium. I think it was other things which still have contaminated the area. So that's another way in which Sun-Pluto opposition has worked. So I'm not saying that this time round that the Sun opposition Pluto is necessarily going to cause a disaster on the level of a Gustloff or Chernobyl. It might, though, encourage someone to make decisions, like Nixon made that decision to bomb Cambodia. But overall, I do think that there's reason to think that today could be dangerous. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, July the 27th, 2026. Aries. There's no reason why you can't start the week strongly. After all, on Monday we see a square aspect between the Moon and Saturn. I know Moon-Saturn square doesn't sound great, does it? But, if you break it down, you've got the moon in Capricorn. And, Capricorn is a sign which can relate to slow and solid ambition. And that square to Saturn means that you have the necessary focus. So moon square Saturn might not necessarily be an easy aspect, but it gives you the motivation, and it also gives you the responsibility required. So on Monday, if there is anything you would like to do that you feel is important, then, I believe that you can just get on with it, and you won't be distracted. Furthermore, you'll understand the pace. As an Aries, you can sometimes be, somewhat impulsive. You want action, you want results. But, this Moon Saturn square, does slow you down. But I think it slows you down in quite a fortunate way. And, we shouldn't forget that, Saturn has just gone stationary retrograde. Again, stationary retrograde sounds a bit difficult, but it just provides you with the ability to just concentrate on one thing, because Saturn is not moving, and Saturn is not moving in your sign. So Saturn being stationary, it just highlights your sign and perhaps just one thing that you regard as being really important. So, the broad picture, Aries, does strike me as being, quite fortunate. And aside from that, Aries, you still have a vision. You have a vision of what is possible. The problem with an aspect like Moon square Saturn is that sometimes it can be quite negative. You can think about all the reasons why something can't happen, all the reasons why there's no point in getting excited. You might take the view there's no point, but for you right now, you maintain that vision. You believe deep down that there are certain things that really are possible. All you have to do is give yourself a chance. And I think part of this is connected with the fact that we have a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. There's a lot to be said about this conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. It's in the sign of Leo. And, is it good? Is it bad? I mean, there are different ways of looking at it. But, given that you have a reasonably serious approach, I think that this Sun-Jupiter conjunction is actually a plus in your life. It's in a fixed sign, but also in a fiery sign, and so you're able to really tune into what you can do well, and it's important, and Jupiter is still pretty close to a square of Pluto. Sorry. An opposition. Jupiter's still pretty close to an opposition of Pluto. So, once you get it in your mind that you want to do something, even if it's quite difficult, then, I really think that you're able to, see it through. And as far as how other people respond to you, well, it kind of depends who they are. If you're dealing with people who you're not super close to, then I think you might come over as being quite an exciting person, quite an interesting person. Even if you are quite serious and quite disciplined, you come over as someone who can have a sense of humour, who also has something to offer. Sun is sextile Uranus, Jupiter is sextile Uranus. Jupiter is not exactly sextile Uranus, but it just gives a picture of someone who is definitely sparking. Loads of things are going on. You're able to come up with ideas if necessary, but you're not going to come up with stupid ideas. I think you do have a certain amount of discipline. So that certainly looks good. Now, if you're dealing with people on a different level, on a sort of one-to-one level, the picture might be different, because we do have a square aspect between Venus and Mars. Venus is ruler of Libra, your opposite sign. It is square Mars, which is of course your ruler. So when you've got Venus square Mars, that might suggest a certain incompatibility. I mean, a temporary incompatibility, but just you and someone else might be coming at a problem or an issue from a different angle, and that different angle might be critical. So yeah, it's possible with Venus square Mars that you can come to some kind of agreement, but it may not necessarily be easy, because fundamentally there might be a difference of approach. Mars in Gemini, you are certainly able to look at things from different angles. I mean, I know that I've just said that you can be quite intense and focused, but you also have an awareness of what is possible. And, you might decide that one approach works better than something else, but the person you're dealing with, that person you're closely dealing with, could be someone really well. Could be a partner, could be a spouse, someone you're working with on a one-to-one level, but their approach is different, and they're taking themselves too seriously. I know that you're quite serious yourself, but you have to remember that Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. Venus, the planet of relationships, making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. So certain people they are wondering about how they can assert themselves, and they don't want to be necessarily told what to do. So I think that in relationships, with that Venus square Mars, with Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto, I think that you have to be somewhat careful and be sensitive as well. Just look at how other people are responding to you. And, there just may be a situation where there is a fundamental difference of approach, and perhaps you should just anticipate it. And, there are going to be times when you get on very well with everyone, but there are going to be other times when things could be a bit touch and go. And perhaps if you use your sensitivity, you can recognize when those moments are about to explode from nowhere. Taurus. Venus is your ruler, of course, and Venus is in Virgo. Nothing wrong with Venus being in Virgo, particularly if you're in Taurus. Nothing wrong with Venus in Virgo, particularly if you are a Taurus. It's a sign. Venus is in a sign where you feel pretty good about yourself, and you know that there are certain things that you can do well. But right now you might feel a little bit pressurized, and it could be that you're perhaps concerned about your own power. Do you have enough power? Can you stand up to people? There may be things going on that just bother you, and you might then be of a view that you had better protect yourself. Now, there is this question about whether or not you are imagining it, or whether you are misunderstanding the signals. And so the question is, what exactly are you concerned about? Now, it is absolutely possible that you can see how you might be at a disadvantage. There are powerful forces out there, powerful people. Those forces could be sort of general, what it's like to live in this world at the end of July 2026. But it could be about particular situations, particular people, and yet you can see how you could be at a disadvantage. And if you're worried about a loss of power, then you might want to take action to protect yourself, but you don't want to go too far. And it might be that you have slightly misunderstood the situation. So, one way of looking at things, I've been talking quite a lot recently in these videos, over the last few weeks about projection. Maybe I've been talking too much about projection. And it's about seeing things in the world around you that are reflections of yourself. So, we look at Pluto, for example. Pluto is in Aquarius, and I think that Pluto moving through Aquarius is good. I think it's good for the average Tauran. It does give you a sense of what you can do, and Pluto in Aquarius is about dealing with the new, and the fact that we're living in a transformative age when there are concepts of power and control, and there are issues, who's in power, who's controlling who, for example, how we're using technology. But it's something that you can own, and so it's possible that you look at what's going on around you, and you are perhaps refusing to recognize your own power. Perhaps you are afraid of your own power. And because you are afraid of your own power, you are pushing it out, and you're sort of seeing power reflected by other people, organizations, and that might end up as you feeling powerless. So you can see how it might work. It starts off at a psychological level as you wanting to be in control and actually having the capacity to be in control, but not fully recognizing. It's not wanting to recognize this. So you see power and controlling influences all around you because you're projecting it all, and then you come to the conclusion that you're helpless, which is a completely contradictory result. And the reality is that you can take charge of things. You really can. And this brings us to this aspect, this sesquiquadrate between Venus and Pluto. Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto, it sounds a bit heavy, Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto, but it is a dynamic aspect, and I think that you are being challenged to ask yourself what you can do. You have your abilities, you have things that you do really well, and maybe at some level you are afraid of showing the world what you can do. You just don't know what the consequences are going to be. You may be worried that you'll get a negative reaction. Maybe you'll be worried that people are going to be jealous of you. You might have doubts, but there's no need to have doubts. And so I think that there is definitely a constructive way of using this Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto. And if you want to really be in control, if you really want to be in the center of things, I think Taurus, you can be. Now, there is a certain question about relationships. Of course, relationships, can be about power and who's making the decisions. And Venus is making a square to Mars. Now, this Venus semi-square Mars, it's not just about today. I think Venus square Mars, I think the aspect is exact on Wednesday. And, Venus square Mars, can be a difficult aspect. And it's an aspect that is often connected with relationships. And if you get close to someone on a one-to-one level, it might not work out. You might feel that the other person is just annoying. They could be just irritating. And maybe that's just the way it is. And so, don't feel that you have to be super close to another person, because, if you are super close to another person, you might, in the end, feel yourself to be at a disadvantage. And, this especially comes to any situation where money is involved. And so money and other people, money and another person with ideas about money. So if another person is telling you to do something with money, and it needn't be a partner, it could be just someone that crops up, someone that calls you out of the blue. I don't know, it could be a salesperson, a cold caller, anyone putting pressure on you in terms of money. You need to be very careful. I mean, they can come up with great ideas. They might sound interesting and compelling, and they'll have an answer for everything. That's Mars in Gemini. But in such a situation, I think Taurus, you should be careful. So when it comes to money today, then do look after yourself and keep your own counsel. Gemini. There is, quite a lot going on. It is a busy day. I mean, it's a busy day for everyone. In fact, this whole sort of first half of a week is rather hectic, and I think that you can feel how hectic it is. And as far as what's going on specifically, you kind of are in the center of things. You just know what's happening, and you want to know what's happening, and you really want to make an impact. And I think you're just interested. Gemini is a sign that is often very curious, and if you don't know what's going on, well, you want to know what's going on. And that can be that can be a Gemini thing. Geminis need to know why. Geminis don't just like doing what they're told. So someone might tell you to do something, but that's not enough. You need to know what the real reasons are. So I think that you are really very curious at the moment, and you want to know. You want to know what's happening behind the scenes, and that's absolutely reasonable. And the more questions you ask, the better. I think. I mean, some people might be annoyed if you have lots of questions, if you seem to be too curious. But can you be too curious if you're a Gemini? Because you want to understand the larger picture. And the concept of education matters. When I say education, however you feel you need to learn stuff, whether it's asking questions, reading things, watching YouTube videos, maybe even signing up for courses, whatever it is. And that is partly the nature of Jupiter moving through Leo. Jupiter's moving through Leo for the next year or so. And so while Jupiter is moving through Leo, you certainly can benefit from just knowing more and being aware of what you don't know. I mean, that's the key, isn't it? It's knowing what you don't know. And if you know what you don't know, that puts you in a very good position, because you're then able to actually seek out the knowledge. And I think that you can be very effective in this direction, and especially now, we've got the Sun starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, and this Sun-Jupiter conjunction, really does give you the opportunity to really ask that question, what you don't know. But the Sun conjunct Jupiter, it has two sides to it, and you could say that Jupiter is combust. And so with Jupiter combust, there just could be a time, over the next few days, where you maybe don't know what you don't know. There could be a few things where you kind of think you're coming to an answer, coming to a solution, but it's actually more complicated than you realize. And so that is a very good reason, Gemini, to just keep asking those questions and keep finding out more. You can never know too much. Is that true? I mean, I really do think it is true. But, you might say that with Venus making a square to Mars, and with Mars in Gemini, and this Venus square Mars is, I think, is not exact until Wednesday. There is some possibility that it appears that you push things too far. Mars in your sign, still in your sign. And in fact, Mars is now moving from, one decanate to another. You can see that Mars is at sort of 20 degrees 8 Gemini. So as Mars moves into that last decanate, you are thinking about what it is that you need to know, what it is that you need to really push for, and you might then find that you're perhaps going in areas that you shouldn't necessarily be going into, or at least from an outside perspective. And so, Venus might complain, Venus square Mars. Venus might be, maybe someone you know well, and you're just too active, and it just might be irritating. And in the process of going through the world, just being a Gemini, you could cause some disruption, and people might just feel a bit uncomfortable in your presence, because you're going too far. And maybe a Gemini, you're being insensitive here. I mean, that's one explanation, but I don't think that's a particularly good explanation, because Mercury is still in Cancer. Mercury is still in a water sign, and so I think instead, you kind of know actually that you're perhaps crossing a line. You know that certain people aren't entirely happy with what you're doing, what you're saying. It could be, for example, that you feel you want to bring something up. You want to talk about the past. You want to say something that could well cause offense. But it. You've got the sensitivity to realize that. Maybe you've got the psychological insight to know how another person is going to respond. But you nonetheless decide to go through with it anyway, because it may be a question of you making the decision that knowledge is what matters, and that is the important point. And continuing on a theme of relationships, if relationships are important to you, it is possible that right now other people, perhaps particular people, are actually becoming quite confused. They don't fully know what's going on, and I've talked about the fact that perhaps you don't know what you don't know. Well, that might be true, but as far as other people are concerned, the people you really have to interact with, that really could be the case. And if anyone feels or sounds really sure of themselves, then that might not necessarily be the case. And there are confusing influences, and you can actually see people in the process of being confused. And if you listen carefully to what they say, and you check what they're saying, you kind of fact check people, you might just see that really they don't know what they're talking about, or they've got some very fundamental things wrong. And that might be when your sensitivity is really needed. What do you do when someone is making a mistake, when someone really believes something, but they've just ignored certain crucial facts? And so that just forces you to be sort of extra sensitive. And if you can, and you can. I mean, as I've said, Mercury is in Cancer, and to really, understand that in the final analysis, Gemini, you know best. if anyone knows, it's you. And there's no need to be arrogant about it. But, you are a Gemini, and it is true, isn't it, that Geminis do know best, or at least they know more than other people. At least, right now you know more than other people, and that's good enough, isn't it? Cancer. Throughout today, the moon is moving through Capricorn, and of course, Capricorn is your opposite sign. And with the moon moving through Capricorn, you're aware that you have to spend some time worrying about what other people are doing, being sort of aware of other people's perspective. They do have a perspective, and it could be that you don't always appreciate other people's perspective, and in some respects you'd rather not have to worry so much about what people are doing. And it kind of depends, doesn't it? But there just could be times during the day when you feel that you're not quite on your own territory, you're on someone else's territory. You have to do things according to someone else's set of rules, and it kind of can't be helped, but it's not exactly empowering. And one aspect we have is Moon square Saturn, and Moon square Saturn is a difficult aspect, and Moon square Saturn just might indicate that certain people are just not really on your wavelength, especially as the moon is making an opposition to Mercury. So you can see that moon in Capricorn is starting to make an opposition to Mercury to 16 Cancer, and so there's so we've got this T square, and so as the day progresses, you might find that other people are increasingly irritating. This is particularly late in the day, particularly in the Americas, but everyone around the world eventually are going to have to deal with that moon opposition Mercury, and so this moon Mercury opposition just could be a disagreement, or in terms of just communication, you're communicating one thing, someone else is communicating another thing, and there just doesn't seem to be any possibility of reasonable compromise. And so that's another reason why other people could be a problem. But it is a T square, and one's got to be positive about T squares. And with a T square, we've been having quite a lot of T squares recently, and so with this T square, you've got Saturn on the T, and Saturn in Aries, just gone just gone retrograde. It's still stationary, and Saturn, in spite of being stationary retrograde, in a way provides the answer. So moon opposition Mercury can be just pointless interaction, discussions, disagreements about nothing substantial, but it just goes on, and you kind of are looking for some kind of solution, and perhaps the solution is action, because you can talk forever. Moon and Mercury, these two planets relating to communication, perhaps difficult communication, people communicating in different ways. It can go on and on, but where is the proof? How do you establish that one person is right and another person is wrong? How are you dynamic? How do you bring all of these different ideas together and turn it into something useful? And perhaps Saturn provides the answer. So if you are involved in a conversation, especially if it's an important conversation, I'm not just talking about, hello, how are you, good morning, goodbye, not that kind of conversation, but a really significant conversation. ideally it needs to transition into something real, where you're talking about action. I mean, that's what matters. And once the action starts, it's about action and direction. You not just talking to someone, but for example, you suggesting that they do something, or they suggest that you do something, or you cooperate on real activity, where there is a general atmosphere of responsibility. That's Saturn in Aries. Then I think that things can move forward in a constructive way. And this is kind of what astrology is about. You look at something difficult and you ask yourself, how do you use the symbolism? And as far as the symbolism is concerned, I think this, the symbolism is really pointing to the idea of just directed action, having a purpose. Always ask, what is the purpose? If something doesn't seem to have a purpose, then I think Cancer, it's time to end it, or at least to move on, to bring things to a conclusion and ask where it's going. And in terms of all your activities, I think that that should be your basic approach. And while we've got this T-square, we've also got an opposition between the Sun and Pluto. And this this Sun-Pluto opposition, it's quite heavy duty. I mean, it's okay. Sun-Pluto opposition, it happens, once a year, and while Pluto is in early Aquarius, it's going to be always this time of the year. But this Sun-Pluto opposition, it could well be about money and resources and control. I mean, Sun and Pluto, yes, they are falling across the finance axis of your horoscope, but it could also be about things which are intense. It can be about things which are competitive, and there are certain things that do bother you, that at least they might bother you today, and they could bother other people as well. Sun opposition Pluto, and it could be about money, and it could be like you wanting things financially to be straightforward and all sort of above board. That's how you want it, but there are just confusing things going on, and the more you look, the more you ask, the more confusing they seem. So probably if you are dealing with anything of a financial nature, just assume that it's complicated, and just take it from there, and just really be ready to understand something like never before. And in this way, you will be utilizing Pluto in the best possible way, with Pluto in Aquarius. And of course, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for ages, until the early 2040s. And so what's that? Nearly 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius, isn't it? But it is a time for Cancerians just not to be satisfied with what things look like on the surface, and just to be ready to really go under the surface and just assume that things are complicated. And you, of all people, Cancer, can deal with those kind of complications. In fact, you can turn them round, and you can take something that appears to be difficult, and you can turn it round and use it to your advantage. In fact, in certain cases, you could deliberately make something complicated, and all the while you know what's going on. And because you make something complicated, that might give you a distinct advantage. Leo. The Sun is really doing quite a lot today. And of course that matters to you, because, the Sun is your ruler. And, the Sun, it recently went into Leo, and the moment the Sun goes into Leo, it just does all sorts of things. I mean, for a start, it's in Leo, it's in your sign, and so Sun in Leo, that's Leo. Leo is the best sign for the Sun to be in. and straight away it just hits the outer planets. So we've had Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all at around 4 degrees Leo, and we've got Jupiter. Well, Jupiter's currently at 6 degrees Leo. So the Sun really hits everything, and you're able to handle it, but you are handling some quite high level forces, things that you might not always understand, that might seem at first sight to just be beyond you. They're just too much to deal with. Now you might then think that, well, if it's too much to deal with, well, you don't want to deal with it. Why should you? Why should you make things more complicated than they need be? But it's okay. The Sun is strong. You are strong, and so you can really contemplate change in a constructive way. And it is the change of the world. It's how everything around us is in a process of transformation. And when everything is in a process of transformation, it's easy to think that we don't have any control. We might feel almost that history is passing us by. It's just everything's just going so quickly, and the moment you understand something, then it just changes again, and you're completely at sea. But no, this is a time to really, open your eyes. Even take the view that you understand it more than anyone else. And if there is a change, you can benefit from it. And when we look at the aspects going on, we've got the Sun opposition Pluto, we've got the Sun trine Neptune, and we've got the Sun sextile Uranus. And so those 3 planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they're all coming together by trine and sextile, and you are right in the middle of it. And the aspect that is probably most difficult is the Sun opposition Pluto, and we've got that opposition exact today. And Sun opposition Pluto does say something about you and the other person. What is that other person like? And there may be issues of power. So with Sun opposition Pluto, you might be of the view that there is something out there that is undermining your power. You don't understand it. Perhaps you can't see it. And it's something that you can't really oppose, you can't really address. And it might well be that this Sun opposition Pluto is reflected by a person or an organization, just something that just seems just too much, and you might just want a quiet life. But I am of the view that when we look at the 12 signs, there is a very good argument for looking at the 12 signs, not as 12 signs, but as 6 polarities, rather than seeing, for example, Leo and Aquarius as separate signs. We should see Leo and Aquarius as an axis. And so when you've got Pluto moving through Aquarius, it says something about you, but Aquarius is a sign that you are least conscious of. And so it's perhaps a part of yourself that you are least conscious of. Pluto and Aquarius, might represent your desire for power, your need to control your environment, and perhaps to be making the decisions, to be making the changes, but you don't necessarily want to do that. You'd rather duck out of the challenge. But if you're kind of open to new possibilities and you really want to try to sort of integrate everything, then this Sun opposition Pluto might be an opportunity. You can start to see what you can do, and at first it might be an unconscious process. So by looking at how other people and organizations and how they're treating you, how they're behaving, you might be given be given a pointer. So even if you're, I don't know, battling an organization or a government or a municipality, whatever you might be battling, it might seem a battle you can't win, but the very fact that you're in a battle does indicate that you potentially have some power. And so it's very important with this Sun opposition Pluto that you absolutely do not underestimate yourself. Though one doesn't necessarily want to make it too complicated. It could well be that Sun opposition Pluto is about a relationship that you're in, and it might be a relationship where the issue of power, is quite important. In which case, don't forget, Sun is in Leo. You are in a strong position, and don't allow yourself to be gaslit. You might be gaslit by another person into thinking you don't have any power, but really you do have power. And I think that you are able to exercise this power. But we shouldn't necessarily obsess about Sun opposition Pluto, and there are other aspects to consider. I mean, the Sun is making a sextile to Uranus, it's making a trine to Neptune. And so, these are sort of more gentle aspects. I mean, certainly compared with Sun opposition Pluto. I mean, I think the Sun sextile Uranus is perhaps what we should concentrate on, and it may be, but we should see everything as coming together. So Sun opposition Pluto might be how you see things to begin with, and then Sun sextile Uranus kind of suggests that, on reflection, you see the opportunity. And Sun sextile Uranus can be, could be something quite trivial. I mean, Sun sextile Uranus can just be about enjoying yourself, just having fun. I mean, that is a way of looking at it, and doing something different. But it could also be about you recognizing, what is possible, and you're starting to see it, and additionally, don't forget that with this Sun making a conjunction to Jupiter, Jupiter is a fortunate planet. It's moving through your sign, and over the next couple of days, Sun moving towards the conjunction of Jupiter. This is a time when you can be lucky. So the question is, how do you maximize your luck? Well, it's quite clear how you maximize your luck. You take advantage of the fact that you are in contact with these outer planets, including Pluto. So if you embrace the outer planets, if you embrace the collective power of the outer planets, you make them yours. You don't run away from their energy. Then you really can put yourself in a really, really good position, and that means that perhaps, Leo, you should be thinking about what you want to achieve over the next few days. You don't have to make it too complicated. Just perhaps you have to sort of set yourself a goal and make it happen, because I think, Leo, that really is something you can do. You can make it happen. And additionally, if you need to be persuasive, then I think you can. And another thing is, don't just be satisfied with just an ordinary existence. Don't be satisfied with just getting by. You should do things as well as is possible, and likewise with your expectations. Really expect the best possible result. I'm not saying you're going to actually get the best possible result, but I think it's important, Leo, that right now you should be aiming high. Virgo. The moon is in Capricorn, and the moon is starting to make an opposition to Mercury, and Mercury is making a square to Saturn. So we do have a T square today, which could have some influence on you. But I mean, I think that the moon moving through Capricorn is very much a positive. I mean, it might not sound a positive, moon in Capricorn, that does sound yeah, a bit difficult, particularly if it's square Saturn. But you're a Virgo. I think that the concept of moon in Capricorn is not really so alien, is it? I mean, Capricorn, moon in Capricorn, that is a sensible place of a moon to be in, and I think that you can take the person you are, and you can use you can use your abilities in an effective way, and at the same time, if you're enjoying doing something, then there is a good chance that it's actually working for you. And so if you're happy doing a particular activity and you feel good about it, then you just need to keep doing it, and do not be distracted, and don't allow other people to get you down. I mean, that I think is important. There are things happening which might seem to be distracting, and you might feel that there are expectations you have to answer. It might seem just easier to do what other people say, just to follow the crowd. But it's not that kind of time, really. It is a time where you need to concentrate on on what you can do, and on what you can do well. And additionally, Virgo, you need to believe in yourself, and also believe in your power to influence. Now, you might not think that that is possible. You might think that other people have their own view, they have their own plans, and they're just not going to listen. But I think they are going to listen. I mean, Venus is still in Virgo. Venus is still moving through your sign, and Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto, and so Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto is potentially about power, and it's also it is about the issue of power. It's quite possible with Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto that you just don't think that anyone is going to listen to you, and that you have no choice. But perhaps that's not because that's just because you're not trying. The point is, you are able to demonstrate this Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto. Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto is somewhat sort of manipulative, and there is a question, who is manipulating who, and I think that you're quite capable of being manipulative yourself, if necessary. And Venus is not just making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto, it's making a square to Mars. And, Mars is in, a high profile part of your chart. You are feeling energetic. There are things you want to do. There are things you want to achieve. And with Venus square Mars, you can, and you can do it, I think, through the power of your persuasion. So don't underestimate yourself in terms of how you are occurring to other people. You might think that other people are just a law unto themselves, and they're not going to listen, they're not going to react to you. But that's not true. If you have a clear purpose, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to really get results. And I think that is the point. You do need a clear purpose. You have to make it very clear, who you are, and what you want. And if you don't have a clear purpose, you don't have any idea where you're going, well, that's where the trouble is. And I'm sort of reminded that you might have your ascendant in Virgo, you might have your sun in Virgo, but it's like the former British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He had his sun in Virgo, and one of the criticisms of Keir Starmer is he didn't have a plan, and because he didn't have a plan, his premiership was doomed, and he allowed himself to be buffeted by other people, and so I think that perhaps Keir Starmer is a good lesson for Virgos. Whether you've got your sun, your moon, or your ascendant in Virgo, you can't just respond. You have to have a plan, and you have to have principles, and you have to have an idea, and you have to be ready to just tell the world what you believe in and hold firm. And if you can do that today, then I think that there's nothing much to worry about. And actually, that's what people want. People want direction, and I think that right now, direction is very much something you can provide. And additionally, Virgo, you can work at many different levels. You don't have to do everything out in the open, and it just could be that things you do in a fairly private way could actually be quite effective. And this might especially be the case if you're doing something that is original and perhaps rather unusual. At first you have to do the work. You don't want to talk about it too much, because sometimes things develop best in the darkness, but at a certain stage they really can come out into the open. Libra, it's really quite an energetic day. I was just doing a video for the week as a whole. I was doing a preview of the week. I don't know whether you saw that video. I usually put it out on Saturday, and I was just looking at where the balance is over the week, and what you find is that all of the activity astrologically is just concentrated Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. After Wednesday, there aren't so many exact aspects. And in terms of this activity, Libra, you're really in the center of things, because Venus does make it makes a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. That's one aspect it makes, and then I think it's on Wednesday. Venus makes a square to Mars, so you feel these aspects. And the question is, are these aspects good or bad, or should we be seeing things in terms of good or bad? I think to an extent it is, very much what you make of them. And with Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto, this aspect is it's potentially quite heavy, and you might feel to begin with that you don't necessarily have much control. You're very much aware of the power equation, which is a very typical Libran things to do. Libra, of all the 12 signs, they know about power. They know about the way people work together. They know where the balance of power lies. And I think that the Venus sesquiquadrate Pluto really does help you to understand this. And your first impression might be to think that it is a situation where you don't have much power. But that's just a first impression, and it kind of depends how you go about things. If, Libra, you were to just go out into the world, if you were to have a sort of an active, extroverted day, then I think that you might find that you don't actually have much control over what is going on. You'd almost be playing the game according to other people's rules. Now, that doesn't mean that you would be disadvantaged. You just have to go into the situation with open eyes. If you want to be seen and heard, if you want to have a high public profile, then you're going to have to accept the situation, accept that other people are making the choices, and your own decision-making capacity is going to be quite minimal. On the other hand, if you were to keep a low profile, if you were to sort of avoid too much contact with other people, then I think it's a different situation. I think that you can work behind the scenes, and no one's going to get in your way, and you can quietly make the decisions. You can quietly decide what you want to do, and perhaps it's just a question of watching. You watch, you learn. You learn from other people's mistakes, or maybe you just get an idea of what other people are trying to do, and that is enough. And later on you can be more decisive. But I think by and large, Libra, you're going to be happiest when you are creating your own world, when you're not straying into someone else's world, having to play things according to someone else's rules. That's not what you want to do. I mean, it might be the case still that there are certain people that can't be avoided. The moon is making a square to Saturn, and Saturn is sort of quite a heavy influence, and Saturn might be a person who just won't go away or can't go away. They're almost kind of like a permanent fixture. And of course, Saturn is stationary retrograde. So Saturn went stationary over the weekend, and it's just there, and you have to accept it, and just don't necessarily feel that you have to sort of exaggerate the seriousness of the situation. And Saturn is in fact at the T of a T square. We do have a T square today. Moon opposition Mercury with Saturn on the T, and so Moon opposition Mercury. It's like you feel that how you want things to be done, and you might know where the power lies, and because you know where the power lies, and you want to maximize your power, then you stay out of everyone's way, and you perhaps opt for a certain amount of seclusion. But there is that Mercury to worry about. Maybe it's not to worry about, but Moon opposition Mercury can be about a communication. It could be about a phone call or a message, a text message, emails, just something that just inevitably attracts your attention. And there is the question of what does it mean? And it could be that, in spite of what I said about the advantages of seclusion, it could be that another person could be helpful. Perhaps a person who does have more power than you, who has more understanding than you. So if you don't understand what something is about, it seems confusing, and your first impulse might be to react. Before reacting, perhaps get some outside help, or just get another opinion. And you don't have to necessarily feel that you have to do everything on your own. And Saturn perhaps could be someone who could actually help you understand something. But I think it is a person who seems to know more than you, and someone whose wisdom you might potentially respect. And additionally, we have this square between Venus and Mars, and Venus and Mars square is Venus-Mars square is exact on Wednesday, but it's it's getting quite close. It's less. Is it Wednesday, but it's exact, or I think it's Wednesday, but it's exact. But they're only a couple of degrees apart, Venus and Mars, and so Venus and Mars is a relationship aspect, and that may say something about a relationship, and it might be that the other person is kind of more positive than you, and they might have ideas, they might be saying things, and you might not necessarily agree with what they are with what they're saying, but it's kind of it's difficult to respond, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying about you having a choice. But as soon as you make a decision to be more out there in the world, perhaps more connected with other people, then you are giving away a certain amount of power, and that Venus square Mars kind of reflects this. That you are perhaps giving something up if you are closely involved with another person. And so that Venus square Mars perhaps does indicate that it's perhaps not a good time to get too close to any one person, because it might not necessarily work as expected, and it just might be a time where you need to respect your own individuality for the moment. Scorpio, there are definitely things going on today. I mean, it's quite a busy day, busy Monday, Scorpio, and it's busy for everyone. There's a lot of astrological activity around, but it doesn't mean to say that it's going to be bad. I mean, I think today could actually be quite fun. I mean, I don't think it's going to be boring, certainly not. And there's a lot to say if you're in the mood for talking, and if you do find yourself talking, well, ask yourself, how long are you going to be talking for? So if you talk to someone for 30 seconds, that's not a problem. But if you talk to someone for longer than 30 seconds, if you have a prolonged conversation, then things could get difficult quickly. You might find that through conversation, you eventually reach a bit of a deadlock. I mean, it might be good that you realize that a deadlock has actually happened, and once you hit this deadlock, well, what do you do? And perhaps it's just demonstrating the limits. The limits of everyone. Everyone has their limits. I mean, it would certainly be nice if people could do everything, if you could trust other people to just take things further and further and further, and it's not your problem, not your worry. You can just rely on everyone else to make things happen. But I don't think you can, because of that moon square Saturn. And I think that in the end, Scorpio, you'll kind of recognize that if you want something finished off, if you want something completed, then it will be down to you to put in the work, and that shouldn't bother you. As a Scorpio, you are someone who is quite self-reliant, and it really is okay. Especially now, we've got the Sun and Jupiter in Leo, and Sun and Jupiter in Leo for the average Scorpio, is great. I mean, even better for the above average Scorpio, because Sun and Jupiter in Leo, they are all about ambition, and that's what now should be all about. And I know that I've said this before, but I'm saying it again. Especially now when the Sun is making an opposition to Pluto, and it's starting to make this conjunction to Jupiter. So the big aspect today is Sun opposition Pluto, and it's an aspect that is certainly powerful. Especially because Jupiter is opposition Pluto as well. And so this aspect, could work in a number of different ways. And what you kind of want to do, Scorpio, is kind of use this aspect in the right way. I mean, there is a possibility that you get sidetracked by the wrong approach, because this is what astrological symbolism is all about. So if we were to look at Sun opposition Pluto in the most negative way, or a negative way, you could say, oh, the sun is in Leo. You are ambitious. There are things you want to do, but the sun is opposition Pluto. Therefore, there are things out there that could just grind you to a halt. It might, for example, be things going on in your home or family pressure. And yeah, you've got these ambitions. There are so many things you'd like to do that you really think you can achieve, but there are other things going on that you have to take notice of. And perhaps the home and the domestic scene are just dragging you in, dragging you down, and you might then feel annoyed and frustrated, but you can't see something through. So that is the most negative way of looking at Sun opposition Pluto. But there is another approach. And you could instead say that Pluto in Aquarius is about not just the home, but it's about who you are fundamentally. What the bedrock of your personality is, what the foundations of your ambitions are, where they all started. And so Sun opposition Pluto can then be a very dynamic aspect, which allows you to get in touch with who you are, and allows you to get in touch with your power. And it can be an overwhelming power, but a power that can really accomplish a huge amount. And so in a way, Scorpio, you have a choice. You can decide how this Sun opposition Pluto is going to work. And if you have ambitions, then now might be a time when you can really work on them. And the Sun is not just making an opposition to Pluto, it's making a sextile to Uranus, and it's making a trine to Neptune. But that sextile to Uranus, likewise, is certainly a dynamic aspect, but it's a sextile. And so you could say, well, the Sun makes the opposition to Pluto, then it makes a sextile to Uranus. And, this sextile to Uranus just gives you ideas. Uranus is a planet that is very original. And so you can see that there are many ways of doing things. You can be open to new possibilities. And so, that is perhaps a little challenging for some Scorpios. Scorpios like to have one particular approach. They can be quite fixed. They make a decision. They stay with it. But with Sun sextile Uranus, you can really, ask important questions. You can ask yourself important questions. You can see what's happening around you. Maybe we're dealing with technological change, social change, and you perhaps suddenly start to see things in a new way, perhaps a new way of not just in terms of ideas, but perhaps a new way of organizing and ordering your life. And I think that you can really bring it all together. So overall, Scorpio, I'm thinking that it really can be not just a powerful Monday, but it can be just a powerful start to the week. And I think Monday through to Wednesday, this first half of the week, Scorpio, I think that there is a lot you can do. And you shouldn't think that, you have to achieve everything by Wednesday, for example. Remember, Jupiter is staying in Leo until July of next year, but it just might be a time when you can really start work on things, or even just have that first idea about what you need to do, and your capacity to change and transform in a way that is entirely fortunate is very much there. So I think if you have the right approach, I think it can be a great day, and I think it can be a great week. And just as I said, Jupiter is in Leo until the end of July of next year, or end of July, sometime in July next year. So do make the most of it. The moon is still in Capricorn, so if we just look at things in terms of moon in Capricorn, well, things don't seem very interesting. I'm going to have to say something about perhaps moon in Capricorn. With moon in Capricorn, at the start of the week, it's a Monday. You may feel that to begin with that there are just, some things which have to be attended to. There may be bills to be paid. Some financial irritation that's perhaps developed over the weekend has to be addressed. Perhaps you weren't able to deal with it over the weekend, and so as you hit Monday, you might think, well, okay, now's your chance. Now you're going to sort it out, and so. It's not necessarily going to be entirely easy, and the moon is making a square to Saturn, so that might be your general impression as you move into Monday. But there are other things going on. We have a Sun opposition Pluto. The Sun is making a sextile to Uranus. Sun trine Neptune. And of course, the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, and this Sun conjunct Jupiter, that is an important aspect. After all, Jupiter is your ruler, and the Sun makes the exact conjunction to Jupiter. I think it's on Wednesday, and so with Sun opposition Pluto, once you've moved through the minutiae of moon in Capricorn, that's just the backdrop. I don't think you should get obsessed with that. The fact that you've got this Sun opposition Pluto, it makes you think about what you know, and some of your ideas, and it might be that you do have clear ideas about the way things should be done, and what is right and wrong, and it might all seem very clear to you, but something might crop up. You just become aware of something that you just haven't quite been aware of before, and it starts off as being quite small, but you keep looking at it. And it then occurs to you that not everything is perfect, that some of the conclusions you have made recently may ideally need to be revisited. Now, you might not want to revisit these ideas, and you might feel that you want to, you maybe want to worry about it later or not at all, and you just want to hold on to what you believe in. But if you find yourself really believing something, and you start to perhaps apply everything that you come across according to some set of beliefs, then that's perhaps a sign that beliefs are under pressure. And you don't want to get caught up with your own beliefs, especially with the Sun starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Because what we've got with the Sun making a conjunction to Jupiter is we have Jupiter being combust. Jupiter is arguably overwhelmed by the Sun. Now, there are good things to say about Sun conjunct Jupiter, but Sun conjunct Jupiter could be a situation where your own ideas and beliefs do trip you up, especially as Pluto is involved. So if you are making decisions today, and not just today, I think, over the next few days, ask yourself why you are making decisions. Human beings don't like to spend too much time processing. They like to have ready-made procedures. In this situation, I will always do this because that's the way the world is, because that is the way I believe. That's what I'm told. And so there is a danger that you just go for these ready-made procedures to deal with things which actually are quite complicated, that do need flexibility not just in terms of what you do, technical flexibility, but also ideological flexibility. If your beliefs are having an impact on your actions, that could be a problem. And we might be talking about wishful thinking. You believe something is true, therefore you believe that particular results are going to happen. And that could be a fundamental mistake. So I think that is perhaps a message for today. But I mean, I don't want to say that things are bad. I mean, we still have the Sun and Jupiter in Leo. This is a time to be open-minded, and you can be open-minded. But to be open-minded, Sagittarius, requires some effort on your part, because I think your natural inclination is actually to be closed-minded. I mean, that doesn't sound a very nice thing to say, but you could. That's a natural inclination. It's kind of what comes easiest. So always be ready to consider new possibilities. Try to look at everything afresh. Forget what happened in the past. Forget your beliefs from the past. Just try to look at every situation you come across with new eyes. Just don't allow the old sights, things you saw in the past, things you assumed you will see. Don't allow those to just completely distract you. You've got to look at things, in their own, from their own merits, and every situation should perhaps be regarded as fresh. And don't let the past and your decisions from the past get in your way. Capricorn. As the day gets underway, the moon in your sign starts to make an opposition to Mercury. It's also making a square to Saturn. And so that means we've got a T-square, moon opposition Mercury, with Saturn on the T. So, with moon in Capricorn, I think that is certainly a good place for the moon to be. If you are a Capricorn, I think that you have a strong sense of who you are. You know what is important, and you believe that you've got most things sorted out. But there might be some resistance. So Moon making an opposition to Mercury, you could regard that as being something annoying. What is annoying you? Something going on outside. It may be what another person is doing. They may be doing something you don't particularly approve of. Someone could be meddling, or someone could just be maybe talking nonsense. I mean, that could be how Moon opposition Mercury works. So, Moon and Mercury, they're both planets which are connected with communication. So if you've got Moon and Mercury opposition one another, then that could just be aggravating. Capricorn is a sensible sign. You don't like just talking for the sake of it. People spouting out ideas for no particular reason. Yeah, it is a waste of time. And so there is definitely an annoyance there, or at least, there could be an annoyance there. And it's all connected, with Saturn. Mercury is square Saturn. You've got Mercury, stationary direct. Okay, Mercury's beginning to gather some speed, but it's almost stationary. Saturn is certainly stationary retrograde, and the moon is hitting them. So the question is, what do you do when you're dealing with an annoying situation? It's not a situation that is, destructive. It just could be a bit of a time waster. And how do you deal with people who are wasting your time? People you just find them to be irritating. Well, Saturn perhaps provides the answer. And Saturn is, in a way, quite strong. I mean, it might not seem strong because it's because it's in Aries, it's fallen in Aries, and you might think, oh, it's turned retrograde, Saturn definitely got to be weakened. But I'm not convinced that's necessarily the case. The point is, Saturn is not moving. Saturn is actually quite intense because it's not moving, because it is stationary retrograde. And so that perhaps means that you're not going to move, you're not going to budge, you're not going to allow yourself to be distracted. And so if there are things going on that you find annoying or irritating, you can bring everything down to earth. You can bring everyone down to earth. And it might just be, Capricorn, a case of just pointing out a few, home truths, and people understand what you're talking about, or they just recognize that you're not going to budge. And, one way of dealing with an annoying situation is not to interact. So if you're dealing with someone who is talking a lot, you can just listen to them. You don't have to say anything. It's likewise, if you get an email from someone who, they want attention, they want an answer from you, you don't have to answer, or you can answer in a way that is just very basic. Nice to hear from you, and not to reply to their substantive arguments. So it could be, Capricorn, that today you shouldn't be tempted, you shouldn't be drawn. Stick to how you want it to be. And even if another person is being irritating, and even if you can see the red flag, you're not a bull, you're a goat. So goats, they can ignore the red flag, they can even eat the red flag, isn't that right? I mean, goats can eat anything, can't they? So that's I think the best approach. And taking action today. There's a lot of temptation to take action, but I think if you were to take action, it just wouldn't necessarily work. It would just backfire. You might think you have to respond, but honestly, Capricorn, I don't think you do. Now, turning to the big aspect of the day, I mean, if you like, the headline aspect is Sun opposition Pluto. This Sun opposition Pluto is it's going to impact everyone. I don't think that this Sun opposition Pluto need be a big deal for you, but if it has any impact, well, this Sun opposition Pluto is across the finance axis of your chart, and so it could have financial implications, and the Sun is also starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, and this is a time with Jupiter in Leo where you need to look at money in a different way, to realize that certain things are just not straightforward. I mean, you'd like them to be straightforward, but I think, Capricorn, you're realizing that they're not necessarily straightforward at all. And so Sun opposition Pluto just is telling you that things are not necessarily as they seem, and it's a good time to be asking questions, and perhaps there are a few realizations. You look at money again, you thought it was going to be straightforward, and then you see that it's just not necessarily straightforward at all. But just because something isn't straightforward doesn't mean you can't do something about it. And the Sun, having made an opposition to Pluto, it makes a sextile to Uranus, and Sun sextile Uranus is quite an unstable aspect, but it's a sextile. It's got some talent to it, and it may be that you can just do a bit of reorganization and change, perhaps change that might seem rather radical and spur of the moment, but you just feel it needs to be done. Because if things carry on like they have done in the past, well, it's just not satisfactory. And so, if you want to shake things up, shake up some of your routines, then I think that might be quite a good thing to do. Aquarius. There is today an opposition between the Sun and Pluto, and this Sun-Pluto opposition is right across the main axis of your chart. You've got Pluto in Aquarius. You've got Sun opposition Pluto, and so this could be quite an intense aspect, especially if relationships are relevant. So the Sun is now in Leo, in your opposite sign, and that does say something about other people. And with Sun in Leo, we could be talking about people who are quite strong, people who certainly should not be underestimated. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're a bad influence. I mean, they could mean well. In fact, they could be a real plus in your life. But with Sun opposition Pluto, well, Pluto can be quite defensive. And, with Pluto in your own sign, you might feel that you do have to look after yourself. It's down to you to make things happen. And, Pluto as a planet can be quite defensive. So when someone does something or appears on the horizon, your immediate reaction might be to slam down the shutters. You don't want to know. And it's not just people. It could be just things from the outside that you don't necessarily want to have anything to do with. And you don't necessarily ask any questions. You just say, well, this is not what you want to deal with right now. And it just might all seem just a little bit too heavy. And so the heaviness of the Sun opposition Pluto might be something that you just decide to personalize, and you just take the view that it's just nothing you want to deal with. But as I said, the Sun is well placed in Leo, and so if you were to completely ignore other people, ignore influences from the outside, then you might be denying yourself something. I think that in many respects you can benefit from interaction with the outside world, and it's not something you necessarily want to do. You might value your own independence, but you can't do everything on your own. And perhaps in some respects, Aquarius, there are certain things in your life that have just got a little bit stuck and a bit stale, and they need to be shaken up. You need an alternative view. And where is that alternative view going to come from? Is it going to come from yourself? Well, can you pick yourself up by your own shoelaces? Oh, maybe you can't. Maybe you need something from the outside to just shake you up, to just allow you to see what might be possible. And it needn't be about people. It could just be being open to new possibilities, going somewhere new, going somewhere different, seeing a new set of ideas. Every now and then it needs to happen. And the Sun is making a sextile to Uranus as well as an opposition to Pluto. In fact, Uranus is still making a trine to Pluto, and it could actually be that with outside help, you're actually able to find out who you really are, what you can do, and how you can take advantage of all the changes going on around us, because things are changing very quickly right now, with Uranus trine Pluto, with all of this outer planet energy. Remember, we've got these Uranus, Neptune, Pluto all at 4 degrees. Uranus 4 degrees Gemini, Neptune 4 degrees Aries, Pluto 4 degrees Aquarius. It is all happening, and on your own, from your own perspective, from your own narrow perspective, you just might not be able to take advantage of it all. But if you can if you're just prepared to be a little bit more open and a little bit more reasonable, I think that can make a big difference, and it gives you an alternative perspective. And I think that it's an alternative perspective that you can very much benefit from. Pisces. Jupiter is an important planet for Pisces, because obviously Jupiter is your ruler, and at the moment Jupiter can't entirely be avoided. I mean, the Sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and Jupiter is still making an opposition to Pluto. And so, perhaps you need to think about, what that actually means. And, with the Sun making a conjunction to Jupiter, that might say something about, the way you are organizing your life. And, you perhaps have had particular routines, or particular routines have started to develop. And as far as routines are concerned, well, Virgo is the opposite sign to Pisces, and so perhaps every Pisces has got a secret Virgo in them. Virgo being an Earth sign, and sometimes it just feels that you need to have particular routines just to keep you anchored, and you're not entirely conscious of what you're doing, but you just know that these routines are necessary. But with Sun conjunct Pluto, it may be that just a few ways in which you have been organizing your life maybe are just not working out as they should be. And if you just do things in the same old way, then you might actually find that it doesn't work out. And there is a lot going on right now, and if you just respond to things just in a way that is automatic, because you might feel that something is just so chaotic that you can't entirely deal with it as a unique individual event. You just have this sort of broad template for dealing with things that you don't understand or that don't make sense. But if you follow that broad template, then you might make mistakes. So you don't want to be fixed in your routines, and you don't want to be fixed in your response. You've got to have, I think, a certain amount of flexibility. And just with that Sun conjunct Jupiter, it's just possible that you might lose that flexibility. And so just consider alternative possibilities. And I think it really matters that you're able to have an open mind, and maybe listen to what other people are telling you. The Moon is making an opposition to Mercury today. Moon is also making a square to Saturn, and that Moon opposition Mercury is, I think, very communicative. A lot is being said, but what is being said might not feel right. You might not feel comfortable with it, but I think Pisces, it's a time where you have to listen to everything going on, everything that someone says. Just listen to everything, and there may be things you're listening to which are just can be ignored, but you don't want to miss crucial details, because the more you listen, the more you will understand the picture, and you will understand then that every situation needs a different response. And I know that Pisces is supposed to be a flexible sign. You can deal with different things in different ways. You go with the sea, you can go with the tides, but you still have a fixed set of responses, and those fixed set of responses seem to be quite strong at the moment. And I'm not convinced that they're going to be, entirely helpful. And so Pisces, I'm not saying it's going to be an entirely easy day, and I think there is a lot going on. There is a lot for you to take on board, and we do have this opposition between the Sun and Pluto, which really could be trying. The Sun opposition, Pluto opposition, just could feel that just something is hard. It's hard work, and it might just seem to be something completely alien to you, and so you don't know how to respond. But the Sun does move on, and it does make a sextile to Uranus, and this sextile Uranus might provide some kind of resolution. It also makes a trine to Neptune, but the Sun sextile Neptune, Sun sextile Uranus, is somehow you have to take something that feels like a lot of pressure from outside, almost alien pressure, but you have to just look at it in different ways and start to own it, make it your challenge, and make it something that you can make sense of in your own unique way. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to move on to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 54, which is the marrying maiden. And the marrying maiden, as the name suggests, is about a woman who is keen to get married. At least that is the symbol. Or it could just be about someone who is just keen for action to take place. There's a sense of hurry, but there's also a sense of too much hurry, maybe indecent hurry. One's in too much of a hurry to get something done. And, if one is in too much of a hurry, that could suggest that there is the possibility of a mistake. And when we're talking about marrying maiden, it's often connected with how one gets involved with something, or maybe with somebody, or if you're thinking about the I Ching, the I Ching is of course an oracle that has its origins in ancient China. It might be a woman trying to become part of the household, and it's difficult for her. What her role is in the household. Is she accepted? Is she not accepted? Does she have a central role, or is she peripheral? So there can be questions about the level to which one is part of something. And this hexagram has two moving lines. It has the bottom line moving and the second from the bottom moving. And so the bottom line is about acceptance. And so, the marrying maiden is looking to be accepted. I mean, that's what it's all about. And so if you are trying to become part of something, if you join something, or if you want to be accepted in any way, it does seem that you will have some success with the bottom line moving. But you also need to have some humility, because it is the bottom line. And because it is because it's a bottom line, that says something about status. And so it might be about being accepted, but one's status is low. And the reason one's status is low, now that might not say anything about you. It may be that you have recently arrived, you don't know what's going on, you're not familiar with the situation, but any form of connection is fine. It should be accepted. And then the second line moves. And the second line is talking about loneliness. And the image of the second line is of a woman who she's in some form of marriage, but it's not a very satisfactory marriage. It's like the partner is just somewhere else. And so this might say something about a relationship. So if you're in a relationship with that second line moving, you just might not feel that you're being treated well, or you just might feel that you're somehow detached from your partner. And it talks about, it talks about just only being able to see things from with one eye. You don't have a complete picture, and so it can be about loneliness within a relationship, but at the same time, being solitary, but also being loyal. And that doesn't sound, a very good position to be in. I mean, this is sort of imperial China, ancient China. So everyone is supposed to, accept their position. And if the wife is not being treated well, is being ignored, maybe she should be happy with the situation. But I mean, it's not negative. I mean, neither of those two lines are negative, but it's just, accepting one's position. Although there is a view that with the second line that you shouldn't necessarily be looking for an association, that you should, appreciate your seclusion, that, getting too close to any one person, may not be such a good idea. And, that kind of links with the fact that today we do have a square between Venus and Mars. So Venus and Mars, these two planets of relationships, Venus and Mars, when they're square with one another, that it does suggest that seclusion, or at least not being too closely connected with another person, might actually be a good idea. Because if we are closely connected with another person with Venus square Mars, there can be trouble. So maybe we can look at the astrology as well. But I think that this hexagram does seem to say a lot about relationships, but it just might be about our view of society, or it could be that maybe you're trying to get a job, or maybe if you're in a job, how you're dealing with the social dynamics, or if you're a part of a society or a club, how the social dynamics are working. And there is this feeling of loneliness here, but it's not loneliness that is necessarily bad. It seems to be the right place to be. And because we got two moving lines, this does mean that we move to a second hexagram. And the second hexagram we move to is hexagram number 16, which is enthusiasm. So there is more positivity here. So to begin with, it just seems that, it's all a bit difficult, particularly if we're involved with other people. But then we move to 16, so perhaps there are things to be happy about, to be optimistic about. If you look at the structure of a hexagram, the top three lines with the top trigram represent thunder, and the bottom three lines, the bottom trigram, represent the receptive. It's quite passive. And so there is a lot of excitement, a lot of thunder around. But the question is, are we dealing with it in the right way? Because the problem about enthusiasm is that, we can get very enthusiastic about things. We can think that everything is good, everything is exciting, things are going to get better. After all, we've got today, one of the aspects we've got today is Sun sextile Uranus and Sun trine Neptune. Well, certainly the Sun sextile Neptune, Uranus is quite an enthusiastic aspect. But, what is the basis for this enthusiasm? And the danger is that there may be no basis for it at all. We just might get excited about nothing. And even worse, there is some danger of complacency here, that there are things going on which are actually quite serious, which could be destructive if we're not careful. and we can perhaps see them moving our way, but we just stay where we are. We're happy, everything's fine. Let's just enjoy the moment, and then we could act too late. And so we just have to be aware of what is going on. And the previous hexagram, the marrying maiden, particularly that second line, is kind of advocating certainly seclusion, but I think also an awareness there. And we perhaps, if we're secluded and looking at things in a different way, if we don't have another person to worry about, or okay, there is someone to worry about, but we're not close enough for them to have a real influence on us, we can perhaps see things in our own way. And if we're honest about it, we realize that things aren't necessarily going to get better, and there might be some danger coming along. And so rather than being enthusiastic, we should perhaps temper this enthusiasm, at least, with a certain amount of caution. And if we see that something is about to go wrong or could go wrong, then I think it's important that we take evasive action. And that is it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.